The Quantum Leap podcast here. We have a special guest that Cory and I know and is very, friendly colleague and, good friend of ours, Phil Bennett, who is actually originally from Bristol, England, and he's been in the States for at least a few years now, and he's an expert in safari tours, and I really have enjoyed our conversations and talking to Phil about what he does, and hearing his story about how he's operating in the COVID environment. I think is an interesting story, and as we look to have things start opening up, I think the challenges that people like Phil face are an interesting story, but then also we got to be able to look ahead to once we come out of this COVID environment. People are going to want to go on vacation, take a safari. This is actually at the top of my list of a place to take my family to see, do something unique, not just go kind of see some sights over there, but to actually do a fun and exciting excursion over in Africa. And Phil's been doing this for a long time, and has a number of different tours that he takes that we're going to talk about. And he also is a photographer too, and he has some good images to show, and he presents at Rotary clubs, and he's an avid conservationist. So if you haven't heard him talk on conservation issues, keep an eye out or get in touch with him to either book him at your Rotary club or your community group or other organization to really get his insights on conservation in Africa. So he has a hand in a number of different things, and we're going to focus on on both issues today, but also Phil's story, and how he's adapting to COVID and what we're kind of seeing in international travel in the time of COVID. So with that, I did want to turn it over to Phil to see if you could introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about your professional background.
Hey, David and Cory. Yeah, thanks very much. So, as David said, I'm originally English. I'm British originally, and I have spent the vast majority of my adult life living in African game reserves in various countries in southern and East Africa. I actually started my professional life in the print media. Working for everybody's favorite media mogul, Mr. Rupert Murdoch. I was a newspaper printer, in fact, working on the newspaper presses for some of his national newspapers in Britain. And at that time, for the rise of the internet, we were seeing the distribution and sales of print media going down. And he built bigger and better new presses, which needed kind of a third of the workforce to operate them. And so he offered packages for people to volunteer if they wanted to take volunteer redundancy. And basically, I made a choice between money and passion and lifestyle. So I had that job in the print media. I was highly skilled, but amongst an aging workforce, and in my early 20s, I could have carried on in that position, earning a great salary for 30, 40 years. But I have always been passionate about nature and wildlife and the outdoors. When I grew up, my idol, and my idol still now, is Sir David Attenborough, the British naturalist and documentary maker. And so I took this big bag of money that Rupert Murdoch was offering, and I took it and became a wildlife safari guide, a naturalist safari guide in Africa. In Kruger National Park, to begin with, in South Africa. It's one of the most famous game reserves, national parks, I should say, in South Africa. Big Five, as they call it, which is the big five most dangerous animals. Well, actually, it used to be a hunting term. The big five was the big five most dangerous animals to hunt on foot. It's now been adopted by tourism. But those animals are elephants, lions, leopard, rhino, and buffalo, Cape buffalo. And so I worked in Kruger National Park for 4 years doing walking safaris, leading walking safaris, and physically tracking these animals to try and see them safely on foot. And we'd also do game drives as well. And that way we'd be able to stay a bit closer and take some photographs and such like. From there, I worked 4 years in Kruger National Park in South Africa, and then I had an opportunity to move up into East Africa. The game reserves, the wilderness area is a lot bigger, a lot more remote. And I worked actually in the biggest game reserve in Africa, biggest single protected area in Africa called Selous Game Reserve in southern Tanzania, which is just below Kenya in East Africa. In Tanzania. And I was in that reserve for 8 years, both guiding, doing walking safaris for international guests, driving safaris in adapted Jeeps, Land Cruisers and Land Rovers, and on boat safaris on lakes and rivers. It's something that people dream of, going on an African safari. And my job as a guide was to take the people out and safely show them these animals without disturbing the animals, allowing the animals to be doing what they would do in their natural habitat, and staying a respectful distance. But often lions or elephants would just walk straight by the vehicle, not really caring about us. And for guests, taking pictures. As you said, I'm also a wildlife photographer, and I know how to approach the wild animals in order to get the best shots and to not disturb and allow natural shots. We don't want to take pictures of animals that are acting differently because of our presence. But really, it's the job of a nature guide is to interpret the wild as the guests are seeing it, but also to facilitate an experience of self-discovery, really, in nature, in wilderness, for the people that are coming. That's the real value that can be taken home, is that holistic understanding of why these big animals exist in a habitat, and the smaller things as well, and getting to know the ecology, the birds, the insects, each knitted into each other and painting that picture. And so that's what I did for the majority of my adult life and my career. And then myself and my wife, who I met along the way, American Tricia, we decided we were approaching our mid-30s. We wanted to maybe settle down, maybe have a child, which I'm happy to say is on its way. I've got a little girl coming in November. But that would have been difficult to do in one of the biggest and most remote game reserves in Africa. If you're 10 hours drive on dirt roads from the nearest hospital or supermarket, then that becomes a bit difficult. So that was when we decided to move away and to come either to Great Britain or to America. The USA, I think, was in part a business choice, and in part so that Tricia could be close to her family. But as a nature guide, who's a safari guide in Africa, what do you do? How does that convert to a job in the United States or in the UK or in the Western world? So the natural step for me really was to open up my own business, which is called On Safari In, and facilitate sending people to Africa and taking people to Africa on small group boutique trips.
Thank you. And I really think your business, of all the, I've met a lot of people in the business networks in Oakland, and it's definitely one of the most interesting and unique businesses that I've seen. And I know it's also one that's been hit probably among the hardest in COVID as well. And I think that's why you have such a powerful story, and that you've really combine, the ability to go after your dreams with something that includes service in terms of the conservation, but also I love your philosophy on, kind of leaving nature intact and that we're visitors over there. So I just think you have a impressive message to share with folks around in the Bay Area and beyond. And, that's why I'm excited to, get your story on the broadcast. And I know Cory was also excited to have you on as well too, and us being also part of Rotary. We've heard about your presentations at a number of chapters too, and great content and a great story to share. I did want to just get to what is going on kind of in the international travel, and really how the hit that you've taken under COVID and what and how you've adapted and just how you're operating under COVID, and if you are still scheduling tours and when those might be available.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, David. You're quite right, as you say. International tourism was one of the hardest hit sectors in the world economy. It basically came to a grinding halt in the space of a week at the beginning of March. People that are, such as myself, that are organizing trips for people in places like the US and sending them all across the world, that means that you have a lot of people going on holidays but can't go. The country's borders shut down, airlines stopped traveling, and the only flights that happened were repatriation flights. So number one for organizations that are travel agencies and tour operators like I am was to do damage control and to rearrange everybody's holidays. Every holiday that was booked needed to be rearranged. Airlines offering rearranging, and we have to, I'll be absolutely clear, airlines and travel agencies could not, just like you cannot give full refunds on everything, because everybody would be out of business. So airlines would be completely out of business. All tour operators would be completely out of business. Everything would fall apart completely. So what that meant was we have to find a solution. People can't lose their money. And so we have to rearrange every holiday that was on our books. That's a tough thing to do. It disappoints a lot of people, but there's still a vacation. That holiday is still there. It's just happening later and at a date unbeknownst to us. But it's kept open. If you go to the other side of that and you think about the hotels, and I work with boutique lodges in Africa, lodges in camps which are fully catered. They are tents which are more like luxury suites, or they are luxury suites holding maybe 24 guests. It's fully catered as a restaurant because you're in the middle of nowhere, so you haven't got a restaurant to go and buy food from. So you're a fully catered restaurant. And overnight, all of these lodges and all the staff which cater to guests shut down. And there's a very high ratio staff to guests. So, for example, in one of the lodges that I used to manage, we would have a maximum of 30 guests and 60 staff. So 2 staff for every guest. And those people have to go home to their villages. Their only source of money, and only source of putting food on the table is the tourist dollars, which are coming in. And when those dry up in a span of a week, they're off. They're having to go off to their local villages and basically go back to subsistence, whether that be farming or cropping wildlife from the local area. And so it's a lose-lose situation for them. That's a kind of the unhappy part of all of this. The happy part is we are a close-knit community. The ecotourism and the conservation tourism community are a close-knit community. We've turned to things like Just Giving, where there's many GoFundMe pages to try and help to support the African communities that were running these lodges, so that they are able to keep a presence in the wild areas, to keep poachers away, and also so that they don't turn to poaching themselves to put food on the table. How am I operating in COVID? Well, until international borders open up and until flights begin to fly into these places, international tourism will remain on. I have rearranged all my safaris to 2021, and slowly things are opening up in Europe. It's still a bit of hit and miss. There's a lot of opening up, and okay, we'll maybe backtrack a little bit. Some of the African countries have had flights just these last couple of weeks arrive. KLM, which is a Dutch airline, have flown their first flight in 4 or 5 months that arrived in Kilimanjaro International Airport near the Serengeti and near Masai Mara in Tanzania. Just last week, my job for all of this and my role and the role of my company really is to keep people's minds on wilderness areas, on conservation tourism, because when we are able to get to these countries, international tourism, which was one of the hardest hit industries, will be one of the industries and one of the sectors which will give our global economy a real boost. It'll reconnect cultures, it'll get money flowing, trade will start flowing across borders. And so going on a beautiful experience which is responsible and ethical, and paying your tourist dollars towards international ecotourism will be of huge value in 2021. And that's where I'm trying to show customers and people that want to go on safari and guests on safari is we can go when flights open up, when borders open up. There will be less people than ever in these wilderness areas. We'll be able to have them all to ourselves, have some of the best experiences at really great prices, because there will be really great deals to be had.
Well put, Phil. Thanks for the positive and some of the challenges. Great story. Now I did want to turn it over to Cory, who had a few questions.
Well, speaking of things opening up and possibly getting back to business, whatever, full or limited way that you can do that. So what types of tours do you offer? And maybe you can talk a little bit about how people can customize their experiences with you.
Yeah, sure. So I do two main things that I do. One is what we would call our FIT travel, or basically it's tailor-made travel. So let's say Mr. or Mrs. Smith come along and they say, oh, it's our 25th wedding anniversary and we'd really love to do something special. Safari in Africa is not the sort of thing that you can just pluck a package off of a shelf. You can actually do that, but you're not really getting the best experience possible. It's also not one of these vacations where you're able to go and book every single element on your own. The distances are too far. Each individual lodge is a different international money transfer. And you don't necessarily know, we know that there's good wildlife in Kenya or Tanzania, but you don't know where are the best places to stay. So that's where I come in. I initially will sit down and have a conversation with the potential safari guests, and we'll understand their expectations, their needs, what they like, what they don't like. And I will go away and I will make a tailor-made itinerary from destination airport to departure airport. They'll be picked up when they arrive in their destination in Africa. They'll be taken to every hotel or lodge or guest house that they're staying at, and I'll do all the logistical travel in between. And they'll be taken on the whole thing and then they'll be dropped back off at the airport at the end of their holiday, and off they go. And I'll be here in the background providing support. If there becomes a challenge, if they say, a flight is delayed, we're not going to get there, I will liaise with my colleagues on the ground, and they will have the best guides, and it will be custom to their experience. And off they go on their lovely vacation. The other thing I do is I do privately guided small group trips, and that is usually between 6 and 10 people, and a max 10 people. 2 expert naturalist guides. I'm usually one of them, and I have a colleague or a friend who I know and know that they're some of the best guides around, and we will take. It's usually a special interest or a very special trip or something that's very unique, and they will be set dates. So, for example, in February of 2021, I'm doing a trip to go and see the Great Migration of the Wildebeest at a time when they will be calving. So 1.2 million wildebeest, giving birth to about 500 wildebeest young in the space of 3 weeks. And all of the predators that come for that. It's one of the biggest wildlife spectacles on Earth. And myself and a colleague from a private guide named Paul will be taking 8 guests across. It's flexible sign up. We'll obviously won't be committed until we know we can get there and we're allowed there. We'll be staying at some of the best lodges at really knocked down prices, and we'll be privately guiding myself and Paul as expert naturalist guides, along with a couple of local guides as well, guys who know the movements of the local lion pride and such like, and taking a really special trip. And that's the 18th to the 28th of February. So that's the 2 kind of strands of what I do, but very almost mix and match. So you can say, well, I like this, I like 5-star, or I like rustic and all sit around the campfire, and I can say, okay, well, this is a good lodge for that, and we'll put that one in for 2 days, and then we'll head off to a new game reserve. So very, very, very changeable and tailored to people's needs.
Awesome. So being a conservationist as you are, and you touched on a little bit about what's going on now, but can you tell us a bit about your conservation efforts in Africa, or, and what are you doing about these issues from your perspective and this side of the pond?
So thanks, Cory. So while I was in Africa as a naturalist guide, I acted as a secretary for the wildlife services management meetings, reserve management meetings, for one of the biggest game reserves in Africa. So as the head guide and as a guide trainer and a lodge manager working in these game reserves, we would be what would be called stakeholders. And I would work alongside anti-poaching unit, the heads of anti-poaching units, the project manager of the game reserves themselves, and alongside career research scientists that are researching the animals and the habitats. I work alongside those to meet challenges on the ground. Away from that, when I've come across, since I've come across here, one of the biggest things that I can do is trying to make the private sector and my company work alongside conservation organizations. And that means that everywhere that I'm taking guests, I am shining a light on conservation issues which need our help, and conservation organizations, non-profit organizations. On a lot of my tours, we meet those people, or on the lodges that I take you to, they have their own initiatives, and we will go into the community, understand how we're learning about these initiatives, and physically help them ourselves. Whilst COVID is happening, that's obviously not something that I can do. So with that in mind, personally, and out with the company, I'm now a part of the Rotary Club of Oakland. I'm now the co-chair of the World Service Committee. And so I'll be bringing forward proposals and projects for the World Service Committee to help, as our service organization, Rotary, to help some human wildlife mitigation issues in Africa, in African areas where communities come into conflict with wild animals. And also volunteering for people like the Wildlife Conservation Network, who are based here in San Francisco, and doing talks and hosting events for them, and for people like the Center of Biological Diversity, and volunteering for those schemes. The best thing that I can do really is really encourage and try and be part of the Kickstarter to the conservation tourism business when we open up again, hopefully soon.
Thank you, Phil. I have one follow-up question.
Yeah.
You mentioned this stuff once, so I went out and got a bottle. What is the best way to drink this? Let's see if I can get it showing on my camera.
For those who can't see it, you're holding up a bottle of Amarula. Amarula is a cream liqueur, similar to Baileys, but better. It's made in South Africa in a place called Phalaborwa on the edge of the Kruger National Park. I actually lived a few miles away from it. It's made from the fruit of a marula tree. Marula fruits are the favorites of elephants, baboons, and people. So it's a big race to get to the marula fruits when they come into fruit. But it's like a less sickly Baileys, and it's nicer than Baileys. It's really nice just on the rocks. But my favorite way to drink it actually is as a replacement to milk in a cup of coffee. Really nice on a cold winter's morning, and not strong alcohol.
Great. Well,
thank you.
With that, we're just a bit out of time. I'm going to really want to thank Phil for coming on. He's really the best in the business when it comes to safari tours. And if you want an exciting and unique excursion, it's really the kind of vacation of your dreams right there. And I'm sure if you do are interested, sit down with Phil and let him tell you more about these tours. I was just blown away at the things that he offers and the ability to customize them. And he is taking safari bookings right now for 2021 with some very innovative tours where you can follow the migration of animals. Pardon me, I don't have the exact term, but just some very impressive trips. So thanks for sharing that with us, Phil. And with that, I'll ask Cory if he has anything before we wrap up.
No, nothing else. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks a lot, Phil. Great. Okay, perfect.